Cześć, hello, Vitam, and welcome to Pierogi to Prayer, the official podcast of St. Joseph's Polish Apostolate of the Diocese of Camden, coming to you from our historic home at 1010 Liberty Street in Camden, New Jersey, the heart of South Jersey's Polonia for over 130 years. I am your host, Michael Matulevich. For anyone who is hopelessly addicted to the internet, and let's face it, that's pretty much all of us, odds are you have become familiar with the term influencer, which has been coined over the past few years and has become something of a buzzword. To be an influencer is to be a sort of modern-day celebrity, measured empirically in the number of followers, likes, and shares that you have. More often than not, this term has also given rise to negative associations. I'm sure you have often heard about how influencers are catering to instant gratification, aiding in the reinforcement of shorter and shorter attention spans, everything that is wrong with this generation, why kids these days, tarnation, and the like. At the risk of belaboring my point with my perhaps unfair characterization of the fish-shaking old coot longing for the good old days, I hope that today's discussion with an influencer may help to change a bit of that perception. For amid all the harmful images and information that leaps off the internet into our smartphones, there are many who have used their online platforms and talents to inform and instruct on valuable topics, some of which are close to the heart of our listeners. Christian Nowak is our guest today, and he has taken his status as an influencer to promote his unique Polish culture among his some 25,000 followers. As you will hear, his pride in his heritage as a Polish Highlander from the regions surrounding Zakopane, where he lives, is something that he displays with every video and post that he makes. It is well known that the Highlander culture maintains a unique set of traditions and customs that are admired the world over. Images of traditional costumes, dances, and music that come from these regions are often a source from which people draw upon when they think of Polish ethnic traditions. Additionally, Christian has an origin story that might also prove very fascinating to our listeners. As a native of Chicago, he was brought up with American and Polish culture, and yet made the decision to move back to Poland to raise his family. No doubt his perspective on all these items will prove for a fascinating listen. Hope that you will enjoy our conversation with Christian. So, Christian, dzień dobry, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity for me to be here.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for coming on to Pierogi to Prayer. It's really excited to talk to you about your work and your life and Polish culture and Polish history as we always do. So I guess we can start out by just kind of telling a little bit about yourself. Just you can talk about basic facts or your family or where you're joining us actually, because it's 2 o'clock in the morning here in the States, but it's 8 o'clock in the morning where you are in Poland. So you can talk about that a little bit.
My name is Christian Nowak, born and raised in Chicago on the west side, and then southwest. If you have viewers that are familiar or listeners, just in the Garfield Ridge area. So mostly in and around Midway Airport, as most of the Poles, there was a lot of Poles on the south side that lived in and around that area. So we lived there. You have the Highlander house there, Dom Podhalan, that I pretty much was raised in, because it was close by. And then, most of us would move out like west. So that we were one of them, but like, I gotta admit, a lot of us moved out there, and I'm hearing that a lot of people are continuing. So yeah, so there's that. But then I moved out to Zakopane in 2020, right before the pandemic hit. Went to high school there in the States, to Argo Community High School in Summit, Illinois. Once I finished that up, I went to Lewis University out in Romeoville. I always stayed at home. I commuted, which was really cool because I was happy to be able to go to a really decent school, continue to play soccer, and continue my soccer career that way. And I was also, being the oldest, I was almost kind of expected to kind of be at home more. And commuting was great for everyone because, yeah, help out a lot. Even living in Poland, half a world away, I help out a lot with a lot of things with regards to my parents. Like, it seems to be like I'm on call all the time. but that's just the thing of being the oldest son, I guess. Wrapped up university with a bachelor's in business administration, and I also did a minor in sports science. So, am I doing all that? Kind of, I guess, because I am technically doing international business out here, which is cool. I'm happy to be able to use whatever I learned at university. It's like the money didn't go to waste, I guess. I've been modeling since I was 16 years old. Started out in Chicago. I was lucky enough to be scouted by a friend's, really an ex-girlfriend's dad, who's a photographer. I'm really grateful for what he did because he gave me a lot of opportunities this way by being able to travel, meet really cool people, and that for me is an absolute blessing. So I'm grateful for that. But when it comes to the Polish Highlander in me, my parents pretty much signed me up to Polish folk dancing, like I mentioned in Dom Podhalan on the south side of Chicago. Well, when I was 5 years old, into a group called Mali Herni. So my mom, she was a part of a group. She moved to the States, if I remember correctly, in 1986, 1987, because she was 16. She's from a small town or a small village near Novetar called Gronkov. um, Back then there wasn't much going on besides farming, cows, and to this day there's just, you go there, there's a bunch of cows everywhere. But there's a lot going on. A lot of people from the States are actually moving back, so you could see this dynamic where you have these old wooden homes and then these like super modern European styled homes, which is it's nuts because people eventually do come back. It seems, especially the older, like I don't know, the 40 pluses, 50 pluses. They're like, okay, yeah, we wanted to always come back. We just wanted to make some money and eventually come back. So my dad, however, he's from Kościelisko, which is right next to Zakopane. The thing about him is he was a professional Nordic combine athlete and later ski jumper.
So it's interesting just hearing your backstory because your story is similar to my wife. She's the oldest. Her parents came over in the mid '80s, and it was kind of like, but they did preserve the language there. She was the oldest of three, and that sense of the oldest child, you know, having that responsibility was definitely very
It's
very
heavy. It's
true.
heavy. It's
Yeah,
heavy.
it is, yeah, and it's not even just her, family unit, individual family unit, her cousins that are here, it's the same thing, she cousins where there's several of them in the oldest, and, so that kinda dynamic is interesting. What also is interesting too about this, so, I'm 5th generation Polish American.
Whoa, fifth
Am I?
generation.
5th generation, yeah. So, I've been fascinated in doing this and getting to know my wife and getting to know more of the more recent Polish immigration, diaspora, how there are so many similarities, and yet there's also so many differences, and a lot of
Mhm.
it came, because the Poland that my family came from is not even does not even remotely exist anymore. Talking about before the First World War.
Yeah.
So the changes in the culture that were obliterated by those two devastating wars. And the thing that I've always been interested, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, this being from Zakopane, from the Podhale area, you know, that sense of partial isolation due to the mountains, to geography there, has always been fascinating to me. How it's preserved a lot of the culture, and even in the different videos that you show of the buildings, these sort of ancient, several hundred-year old churches and houses, these beautiful, ornately carved wooden buildings. Is just really extraordinary to see.
No, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what it is. We were lucky enough that we're in a valley essentially, right? We have the Tatra Mountains to our south, and then you have the Gubaovka Hill, and then you have a bunch of hills that go and there's only really two ways in to get to Zakopane is through Kościelisko, where my dad's from, and then through like Nowy Targ, which was the main road back in the day. You're totally right. Like there weren't many houses. Only in the late 1800s and early 1900s did they really start to build because Poland didn't exist in those times. Essentially, we were just here. There was industrialization going on here, believe it or not, because this was the Austro-Hungarian Empire that took us in. So a lot of the forests here were cut down. So what you see now, it was pretty barren. There weren't many trees. They were only later in like the 1900s, once the war was over, the First World War, they started planting trees to where we have, to where they grew out to what we have today. So not many city folk were going on here because nothing grows here, right? Not a lot of food is able to grow here. So the only thing that really was going down was shepherding by the thousands. I'm telling you, like what we have now, because we're continuing this tradition today. This was a forgotten area for hundreds of years. Essentially, people who knew to come here, like I mentioned, were people with sheep because they were grazing the land. So just essentially, these families were marrying amongst each other. Sometimes you'll have people coming in from Romania or from other parts of the Carpathian mountain range, and that's about it. Sometimes you had people from Germany, and I'm talking sometimes like 300-400 years ago, coming in to work seasonally in the mines here. Like for example, in the Kościelisko Valley, there were mines there, and they would come work seasonally. So here's a cool little thing. A lot of those families would stay. So in Vitov, for example, a town where my grandpa lives, and which is next to Kościelisko. So if I'm kind of drawing it out for you, you have Zakopane, Kościelisko, and Vitov. That's going west. There's a lot of people with the last name König or Kenning, and to this day, like that's obviously a German name meaning king, right?
Yeah.
So this comes from the German seasonal workers that would come here and work in the mines, for example. And they just probably found someone and married and settled down here. Other than that, not much was going on. Only until later, again, you had the 1800s. People were going by horse and buggy. They were, and by they I mean the people from Warsaw, for example. There was a lot of people coming in from Warsaw because they were interested in the just getting away from the city. Like to this day, it's exactly the same way, isn't it?
Yeah.
You go to the mountains to relax. So
Yeah. Huh. Wow. That's really fascinating because like my wife's family is from near Tarnów, and then my ancestors are from northeast Poland, from Suwałki. So and in getting more into my Polish culture, as I have even just over the past 10 years or so, learning about the that area and how unique it is, and even so at the Shrine of Our Lady Częstochowa here in Doylestown,
yeah,
they always have there's a group from, I think they're out in Michigan is where they're headquartered, and it's the Owczarek Podhalańska, the Polish sheepdogs,
yeah.
and they have kind of this fascinating story. So it's funny that you bring up the sheep as being, because they have this this rare dog breed that was all, essentially endangered at a certain point, and how it's been this revival of it. And
yeah.
And that's the thing too, like like you go to Zakopane, because we were there a couple of years ago, and we did the the Morskie Oko hike, and you see these beautiful pictures of, and we took some that were just gorgeous, but you don't see pictures of the thousands of people that are on that trail.
We try to like not show that.
Yeah. Because it's not good for business. Yeah, and like the tourist element. I mean, maybe talk a little bit about that, because it is, you see, and it's very diverse down there now too. A lot of people, not even just from Poland. It seems that there's a lot of outsiders, that tourists, and it's just this big touristy town. You have that main strip that has all the stores. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it has all the stores and the restaurants, and I mean, you have the Gorale band and one playing, and it's kind of like this neat little town, but it almost takes on that life of its own, that tourist sense. So how is it? How does that feel to you, being a native, so to speak? This multi-generational, hundreds of years of history of your family there. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Okay, I'll start by saying that Krupówki Street, it's man, we don't go there unless it's off season. we were there. Right now there was a long weekend because it was November 11th. So remembrance, it's Polish Independence Day essentially, right? We were there because we were invited to take part in a culinary festival of the Bahleda Tsurush. They're a big Highlander family here, and they have a bunch of restaurants in Zakopane. So we were there, and boy, we got lucky to get parking, but there were lines to every single restaurant, and I was absolutely dumbfounded. I had to talk. I talked with a buddy who's a taxi driver, and I told him, or I asked him, like, what do you take out, like, what's your takeaway from this? He says, man, it's not like this during New Year's Eve. This is crazy. It doesn't make sense. I'm like, well, let's be happy that there are that many tourists in the off season then. But when it comes to the tourists, they come in waves. You have, like, it seems that we know when Warsaw will come. Like, so we say, jedzie Warszawa. So we know that for example, in the feria, the winter feria, so the um, winter break, every województwo, or even let's call it the województwo, or it's like essentially there's 16 mini states in Poland. So let's say we're in Lesser Poland or Małopolska. So Małopolska and another one, I can't remember which one because I don't live here long enough, I guess. They have at the same time 2 weeks of winter vacation, for example. So then, so we kind of base the winter breaks off of that. So we know, okay, so if we know that Warsaw and this state are going to be coming to Poland, then we know it's going to be big because, for example, the Varsovians, when they come in, they are a large group of people. They're city folk. And so we prepare ourselves for that. Then you have, so winter break's huge. So January to like March. Then you have like a month off where it's like nice and slow. And then you have Easter, which is a big boom. And then it slows down again. Then you have Boże Ciało in June. And then you have July, August, September, which is, again, peak season. October slows down, kind of. Depends on the weekends. If the weekends are nice, you're going to have people. Then you have November. So again, apparently it's dead season completely. But then you had Independence Day where we didn't know, like, because full time I work as a sales rep at a food wholesaler. We're called Brutal, so brutal. The name is funny, but it's got its own history. So we were completely blown away as to how many, like, how the sales went. It was a good week, right? A good weekend. But based off of that, you could see just how many, honestly, I think hundreds upon thousands of people drove into this little valley. Like, I always say, we're not made of like bubble gum. We're not made of rubber. We can't stretch these parking lots or streets. It would be great, but if all these people come in, which again is great, everything's at a standstill. So and it's mostly Polish people that come in. Then you have a wave of Hungarians that come in, then they leave. Then you have a wave of Czechs and Slovaks that come in, and then they leave. Mostly during the summer seasons, you'll have a lot of people from the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, flying in, and they absolutely love it here because they're from Abu Dhabi, from Qatar, Dubai, mostly. So what they do is they come here because they've never experienced like rain, for example. They're looking up at the sky and recording as it rains. It's like, you guys, I could understand that though. So it's been super diversified, like the tourists, completely from all over the world,
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I think I can compare it to around here we have the New Jersey Shore Points.
Okay, yeah.
These little towns on these barrier islands that are spread up and down the coast of New Jersey, and but it's thankfully for them, I think comparatively, it's just the summer. It's Labor Day to Memorial Day weekend, and but they get swamped, and there's almost this kind of love-hate relationship where, yeah, they love the tourists, they love the dollars, but it's like they even have a slang term for people that come in from the city,
What
from
is it?
Philadelphia, the shoebies they call them.
It's Shubis.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the etymology is of it, but
Yeah,
but yeah, it's just so I think it's comparable to that. But your season seems like it's a lot longer.
it was. Uh, okay, so I'll talk to like the older sales rep who's been at the warehouse for like 20 years, and he's like, Christian, there's no off season anymore, man. It's just it's he says, I remember back in the day, and I'm like, you're talking like you're 7 years old, like
Yeah.
relax. I'm like, Johnny, come on. And he's like, okay, okay. So what I mean is, he's like, during the summer and winter, and then everything in between was we're literally sitting around and waiting for work to be handed to us because there was nothing going on. Now, which, again, thankfully, there's a lot going on all the time. Our word for tourists, no matter what they are, because it always began with the city folk. So anyone from like Krakow, Warszawa, Poznań, Wrocław, anywhere. They're called cepry. Ja, jedzie ceper. To są cepry. Like, because usually tourists, when they come here, they like to turn off their like thinking, like they take their thinking cap off.
Yeah, I'd be interested if any, the people that do listen that live down the New Jersey Shore are probably
Yeah.
listening to this right now and like shaking. They're like, yes, that's exactly what we deal with here.
Well, but going to Krupówki Street, most of the city center isn't owned by Highlanders anymore. Krupówki comes from the last name Krupa, so it'd be so Krupówki used to belong, like, okay, and by used to I mean hundreds of years ago. It used to belong mostly, that used to be a glade, right, where sheep would graze. So that would be belong to the Krupa family, because right next to Krupówki Street, now it's just building upon building upon building. It's a cobblestone road that you could only walk on. There's no cars going there unless in the morning hours when you have deliveries, like, to restaurants. Then you have a park on the side of it. I don't know if you remember. It's just grass, trees, and walkways and paths. So that's called Równi Krupowa, because it's just Krupova, like it belonged to the, again, Krupa family, and it's just flat. It's a park now. It's a really nice park. So that all belonged to, like, for example, the Krupe. Now it's, you have these big buildings that are mostly not owned by Highlanders, to be honest, except for that one family who I mentioned before, does that festival of their restaurants, right? The Bahla Datsurush family, they have a bunch of spots that belong to them. But other than that, they're mostly owned by people from outside of the Highland area. Yeah. So a lot of people will say, oh, those Highlanders are it's always monies and dollars for like, it's always pennies and dollars, for them. And I'm like thinking, and I'm trying to, like, save face here, because, like, yeah, I'm kind of an outsider, right? Because I'm from Chicago. I'm looking from a different perspective here. I'm like, yes, it comes down to making money, because that's the world we live in now, right? We got to pay the bills. But also, that's not true, because there a lot of them. I'm just reading the comments on Facebook in certain spots, mostly from city people, saying that, oh, Highlanders are this and that. Well, it's like, well, you don't know it, but Varsuvian is the one that owns a lot of these places that you guys go to, that you guys complain about the prices of food. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think it's just a form of, they need to be educated on the fact, but it's better to just throw it down to one group of people. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean,
Easier that way.
yeah, exactly. It's the make it the other, the boogeyman, the whatever you want to call it. It's unfortunately almost seems like it's part of human nature.
That is
But
human
yeah,
nature.
so
But I did want to ask something.
yeah.
You said you're fifth generation, but that blew my mind. It's still like, I'm thinking about it. So you, not only you're fifth generation, usually by then people don't even know where Poland is on the map, right? They're just, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
and that's something too that I thought maybe we could talk about a little bit, because it's I in some respects, like you look at all my first cousins,
Right.
I'm the one who speaks Polish, and they've a lot of them have been absorbed into this, what America is, this kind of melting pot
Yeah.
they call it, and but there was always this sense that we were holding on to something. There was but our Polish identity was usually tied up in food, usually, or religion. We went to the
Mhm.
Polish church, or we ate pierogi, and
Awesome.
it was something that my grandparents certainly instilled, but it was part of them that it's almost as if Poland always has this hold on you, even if it's multi-generational in some fashion, even if you're not so into it like I am. And I mean, and part of it too, I married my wife who's first generation, and we speak Polish at home. We will raise our son to speak Polish, and
That's
so I've
all
definitely jumped more into it, um, more so than a lot of, I guess, your average immigrant from that, you
because your
know.
wife.
Yeah, yeah, and in a lot of ways. But it was also, even before I met her, it was still very much. I was very interested, very involved in the Polish
That's what I'm
community.
saying. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
very involved, and then I met my wife, and then I completely dove into it. You know what
Okay.
I mean?
Oh, great, great. Yeah, and so I kind of was curious to talk about that a little bit. So, like, again, you're born and raised in Chicago, and even if you're first generation or you're fifth generation, a lot of times it's like you have that. It's like you come to America and you're here. And what I was, because I'm big into genealogy too, and what I came to find out too, a lot of people that were fifth, five generations ago, they came with the expectation of going back, and weren't able to for one reason to another, or some of them did go back. Like my third great grandfather died during World War I. So I maybe talk a little bit about that, about what motivated the move back to Poland, but then also what was your sense of being Polish in America, and I mean, how did that? Just I'm curious about that. You talk a little bit about that.
So my thinking is this, because my wife, she is from Zakopane. She was born and raised here. That's definitely one of the main reasons I moved here. But my parents would always send me to my grandparents here a couple of times with my brother, but I was here every year or every 2 years. So I'd be in Kościelisko, I'd be in Witów, I'd be in my mom's town of Gronkov, and I remember before the infrastructure was super, it's like it's fantastic now. Obviously, you could always be better, but you know what I mean. Like 25 years ago, when I started coming here, uh, it was completely different. But so you go here for a month, you're living, you're seeing cows coming up to the fence. You see the mountains when you wake up, and you get this sense of like, dang, I'm always here every year. This is where my parents are from. These are where my grandparents are from.
Hmm.
I felt this tie. I felt very like connected to it, and it got stronger every time. So my thinking was, and not only my thinking, a lot of my friends that are living in Chicago, they would always say, "Oh, I'd love nothing more than to move to Zakopane or just to move back here," even though they were born and raised in Chicago like me. It was always like a fantasy, it was always like a dream. But then we got older, right? Then obviously we're like, okay, that's far fetched because we got to work, right? Got to do university, pay off debts and stuff. It's the American way. But then in 2014, we came here as a family. So for the first time ever, we're all together as a family. So all six of us: my dad, mom, myself, my brother, and two sisters. We had about a week and a half left before we left. So we're here for a month, right? And my dad was showing us all the places that he would go to, shortcuts he took to get from, like, for example, Gubaovka Hill back home. So we went to this shortcut, but really it wasn't how it was back in the 80s. There were no fences back in the 80s. Now you have fence after fence after fence after fence. And so I remember that one in particular turned out to be several hour walk. You know what I mean? I'm like, Dad, you're never showing us a shortcut again. This isn't the Poland that was back in when you were a child, unfortunately. There was a lot more free back then, even though it was under like a socialist rule, right? So a week and a half before we're about to go back to Chicago, my dad's like, "Okay, let's go to, my friend's store." And we go to my dad's friend's store, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I know this woman." Um, because it's a childhood friend from my dad's side. I remember because she was in the States, so literally several years before, on my mom's 40th. You were at my mom's birthday like 4 years ago. She's like, "Yeah, how do you remember that?" I was like, "I have a good I have a good memory." But I do remember also that you said you have a daughter for me. And she's like, "Oh my God, I'm like, yeah, you said that." And I do remember that because again, these old aunties would be like, always, "Ah, mom, da
Yeah.
ciebie." And she was one of them. And she's like, "Oh, well, then if that's the case, I must have meant Ola, my oldest daughter. Oh, which happens to be here right now because she's working, like somewhere in the store. Then I can't remember where. And we meet each other, and it was like, hi, hi. All right, that's about it. Pleasure to meet you. And we just went our ways. Um, a few days later, we were in Kościelisko, and there's like a big biathlon stadium, right? But it's like this big competition, and I signed up for it. And she also made like a suggestion during this competition that if you want to drive a stick shift car, I could teach you. You have a week left, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'd love nothing more than to learn how to drive a stick shift car because in America, automatic cars reign king, right? So it was essentially my foot in the door, and for a whole week, so almost 5 or 6 nights, she would finish work and she would drive over to Kościelisko, which is like a 10-15 minute drive. And literally, we would practically all night until about 5 a.m. when it was 5:30 a.m. when the sun was rising. We'd be driving around the entire Potada area until I learned how to drive stick shift. So you're talking for hours, you know what I mean? For 5 to 6 nights. And you're getting to know a person in a very condensed amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, dang, she could be the one, right? So, the day we're about to leave, which was July 28th, I said, "Do you want to try long distance?" You know what I mean? And she's like, "Well, yeah, what do you think?" I was like, "Okay, cool." Uh, so that's what we did. Yeah, and so I had I had 2 more years of college. She still had like the equivalent of trade school here because she's only a year younger than me. And we did long distance for a year and a half, and then she flew to the States for 2.5 months. And this is how small this world is. Her grandma, so her only family in the United States, because she has a godmom in Canada, her only family in the United States was her grandma, who went to the same parish that I did,
Hmm.
a 3-minute drive away.
Wow.
How crazy is that? So she stayed at her grandma's, and I'm like, why don't you want to do university here or college? Like, if you want to learn the language, you got to be in it. You know what I mean? Then once she had like the support of her family, her parents, because that's obviously big, she did come here and she went to community college for 2 years. And then she went to the same university that I did for 2 more years. So we're both alumni from Lewis University, which is really cool. But then we're getting serious, right? It's 20, I'd say 18. We're like, hmm. Well, if we want to be together, we have to pick either the United States or Poland, right? I'm kind of sick of the commute to drive into Chicago. And I'm not saying because I had a great full time job in the city of Chicago, but I couldn't see myself wasting 3 hours a day driving, commuting. You know what I mean? So okay, then why don't you do something in the suburbs? I was like, I guess. But we're kind of thinking, well, we want to live in the mountains. Like, I don't want to live in the city. I kind of don't like this whole thing. I love Chicago. Like, it's in, like 100% will always be my city. When I go back, I appreciate it more for sure. But when you're driving there, you're like, oh God, I hate this traffic. Like, it's obviously a different mindset then. So we're thinking Colorado, maybe. We've been to Colorado. We love the mountains there. Fantastic. But I have distant family from there by the Stravnica area where you were.
Mhm.
But they're living out in Colorado. But I'm like, man, I don't really have too much contact with them. It's like you're starting from zero with, creating a community. But I have a community here out in Poland because I have friends, I have family also. She has her entire family here. So like, well, that's a big plus. Then you have taxes. Cook County taxes are some of the largest in the states, if not the largest county or the highest taxes in the states when it comes to counties. It's not safe in a lot of parts. So I'm thinking, dude, if you want to raise a family, and I want to raise a family, I'm like thinking, well, let's just do it then. I've always said, like, me and my buddies were all like, oh, we want to move to Zakopane, or like this area, general area. Why don't we just do it? Ola's going back to her house essentially. I'm just moving back to where my roots are from because I'm first generation. So it's not like we're skipping too much, but obviously, so those were the main drivers. Raising a family, where would you want to do it? We could raise it in any part of the states, but then you're missing the culture, right? The Highland culture. It's always been in Chicago. It's really alive and well. How it will be in several generations, I don't know, but it's been pretty strong. But I wanted to go back to where it came from. You know what I mean? To the root of it. So that was also important for me as a guy who's been always cultivating it. I'm like, dang, I'd rather, I think, be in it where it originated. So that's essentially the whole drive to move to Poland. Oh, and also travel. Oh yeah. Living in Europe, you have open doors essentially. If especially you have a Polish passport, which I do. Luckily, my mom, she was very adamant on us getting Polish passports as soon as possible. That opens a lot of doors. And also modeling. I still model, and Europe is just got a bigger modeling. Uh, there are a lot of there are a lot more opportunities here for modeling. So, and I definitely feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It just is. It's kind of interesting to me to hear that, especially from someone who's a similar age to me, about that. Having that pull, that history in the family, and then making that decision, because it always seems like it's almost heretical to make that jump back to Poland, and now too, Poland is so on the ascendancy. I mean, it's I think it's the fastest growing economy in Europe,
Yeah.
and there's all these kind of external, just kind of bread and butter factors that might pull people back to Poland, and then too, like you get that. I think you touched a little bit about this, this sense of what European life is like, which is, yeah, you're connected to all these different uh, other countries, traveling, and just there's such a richness there, and the history and the culture, like you said, personally, in your family is just, yeah, I can understand that completely, because it's
Right.
just, and it's something that, especially, I noticed the more recent polls that I know, both my wife's family and just friends that have talked about that same thing, like what, but it just does. I think there's this great fear to even contemplate it. It's almost as if, well, I think part of it too is, when your parents came, like, it seemed Polish people came here when times were tough, when it
Right.
was either under communist regime back in the 80s, like your family, whether it was under the partitions, like my family,
Right.
post
That's
World
right.
War II. There was a lot of people who immigrated to our community in Camden that were displaced persons
Wow.
from, the horrors of the war. So I guess it's just this sense that things were always just bad or worse there, that now it's the idea of that not being the case just
It's
doesn't.
my job to enlighten people.
Yeah,
Oh,
and bringing that up, yeah, I mean, talk about that a little bit now, too, because so how I found you is through your influencing career professionally. You said you do modeling, you work at the food wholesalers. You obviously have this great passion for your family's history and for Poland's history, and your videos are great, showcasing the area of Zakopane and all these just terrific sites. I was like making all kinds of notes for my next visit where I want to go. Um, so I mean, talk a little bit about that. How did you get into this? I mean, influencing is a thing that it's like, in some respects, there's always been influencers, right? I mean,
yeah.
people, like, you look at like even Saint Maximilian Kolbe, for instance, who's probably going to be the Polish Say of the Month that I'm going to feature when this comes out.
Thank
You
you.
know, he
So
used he
that
used
person.
yeah, he used radio, when he was starting to get his message out. So now, because everybody has a smartphone and an internet connection and the access to this ability to cut and make these really professional videos, it's influencing has become this phenomenon. So, I mean, talk a little bit about it. How did you get into it, and just sort of your take on that.
Well, I went from because we all have Instagram. I don't know how many millions of, I think probably over a billion people have Instagram. I think
I wouldn't be
it's
surprised.
just, I would not be surprised. Yeah, exactly.
It all started when I actually lived in Miami for 4 months working as a model, but that didn't work out too well. The golden age of modeling in Miami was when I think the first Bad Boys came out. So
Okay.
it's been a while. So I was living out there for 4 months with a bunch of guys from the Midwest that were also models. We were in one apartment, and I was starting to throw videos and photos. If you go back far enough on my Instagram, you'll see a bunch of stuff from Miami. So my growing blew up then, because who doesn't want to live by a beach and literally going every day and playing volleyball every day on the beach while waiting for photo shoots to come and fall in your lap? That essentially was the Miami lifestyle. You know, beers on the beach and volleyball with buddies. That's all. It was problem free. And that's what I was showing kind of then. But man, it was like, and then I go back to Chicago and suddenly I'm like, what am I going to show? I live in the suburbs of Chicago. So it kind of died down. But once in a while, I'll throw something on there just to stay active. Now living out here, then fast forward years, right? I had a decent following then, but then it would slowly fall off as I didn't live in Miami anymore, right? And this year, I kind of made a list of things I would like to accomplish. And in the very beginning, and one of those was to grow my Instagram following. I didn't know how, to be completely honest. I had no plan, but I'm like, this is what I'd like to accomplish. It'll come up, right? It'll happen some one way or another. I've always posted like on my stories because I was mostly model oriented, like my Instagram. But this year was kind of like a rebrand because I'm like, I don't model as much anymore. I do once in a while. It's not my bread and butter. It's definitely something I enjoy to do because I've done it for half of my lifetime. But a friend of mine, well, she's now a friend of mine. She asked me to take part in a reel, like we collaborated on a reel together, and it was a funny one. It was like in July because she noticed me beforehand. We were doing I would do some stuff about like Highlander, like videos, photos, living in the mountains. So there was some traction there. People were picking me up, and there was like some sort of like there was more growth, right? So I'm like, cool, maybe this is what I got to do. And my wife, she said, you should do all your reels in English. I was like, oh, true. It's easier for me because it's like I speak fluently in Polish and in the Highlander dialect, which is honestly it could be a language of its own. But then this Instagram friend, right? Now we're totally cool buddies. She reached out to me. She said, "Do you want to collaborate and do a reel together?" Where because she does her thing is she pretends to be like this ciotka z Ameryki. She's a friend, like a auntie from Poland or from America that comes to Poland. There's a stereotype that they always come and they always like bring candy and then they go shopping together and they're very extra there. And she does it perfectly because she had this aunt that she could really it, it was her inspiration, right? And I told her, I'm like, Mihalina, her name is Michelle, and she's from like before Stravnica, so she's from Kruszkowce, Maniów, that area. A fantastic person. So she she got me in on this where I'd play Ujek Ameryki, so her husband, like,
Yeah.
and that we're coming to Poland after many years of not being there, right? But I'm like, look, I don't have that Polish accent that you have because I have an American accent, but like, I'll try my best. She's like, don't even worry about it. We'll have fun. And I was like, cool. All right. I did my best. And to be honest, it kind of blew up because there was almost 1 million people saw that one and a whole bunch of followers coming in. And then I'm like, you know what? I think this is the route. So what I started doing was this was peak summer. So a lot of things were going on. Then there was the 500-year anniversary of the Gąsienica clan that I mentioned before, and through my grandma, I'm a part of that family tree. So there was a mass in the Gąsienica meadow or glade in the mountains. It's one of the most beautiful ones. So there, I'm like, dang, I'm gonna dress up in my Highlander outfit. I'm gonna walk all the way up there. I'll hike it up, and I mean, it's not like a crazy hike. It's an hour and a half. So I'll show it and how it looks. And yeah, that one blew up, and the next one blew up, and the next one blew up, and a lot of them blew up essentially where I was dressed up in the Highlander outfit. I'm speaking in English, and I'm really digging into the history and culture. So I was like, okay, so I think what I'm gonna have to do is just make this into the niche that, because it clearly works. And I always have captions written in Polish, so that way Polish people could also read it. So that way I'm on, I'm here and there. I do have a lot of people that are asking me to do it in strictly Góralskie in the Highlander dialect, which I'll definitely get to. But I can't do everything at once. But this is essentially this is what it is. That's how it looks, and I kind of fell into it, maybe manifested it. I don't know. I'm just gonna continue doing it because this is something that I actually enjoy doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think that you say you did your videos in English, and that's what made it explode.
It's crazy.
Um, and so those English speakers are. Do you know demographically? Are they Americans? Are they UK? Where's it generally come from?
Honestly, they come from all over the world, and
Mm,
they'll reach out to me privately on like in the DMs, right? Or they'll comment, and I wish I could get to all the comments, but again,
well, yeah,
I do the best I could. But it's really cool when people write to me privately. I enjoy it because they'll say, "Hey, I'm from here and here in Poland, living in Sussex, England, somewhere in there." I was like, "Whoa, I really miss it. It's not the way it used to be here. I want to go back." I was like, "Well, the doors are open. If you were not like excommunicated, you could always come back." Like if and they haven't been in Poland for 15 years, right? I was like, "Well, go back. You have a 2-hour flight. Like it's fantastic, I'm sure. No matter even if you come from a small village, there are opportunities. We have internet connection. I have a friend here from Chicago living in Kosciuszko, making a great living working in IT. Maybe you're not IT then. Well, but there's many different opportunities. If you go to Krakow, they love English speakers there, for example. So if you're living in a different country but you're from Poland, if you want to come back to Poland, go to these cities where they need English speakers. There are so many job opportunities. I know the market, the whole world is kind of going crazy where it's layoffs here and there. However, I mean, I think Poland, like you said before, is growing. Like there's opportunities everywhere. You just have to look. Like there's opportunities and doors opening for me because I just threw myself out there. You have to try because now this is the older brother in me speaking now because I have younger siblings that I always try to be a good example for. Like you guys can't just like you have to literally throw yourself out there. It's not like you have to plan, of course. Like for example, the move to Poland wasn't just all right, I'm sending packages and our car in a container to Poland. I'll see you there. No, this took several years of planning. I did it. I'm like, I don't like to make big decisions like that. We took 2 years, because she still had to finish her schooling. I still had to finish up my job. So, but I love when people write to me essentially because I like to be their connect here. You know what I mean? They'll ask me, "Hey, I'm in Zakopane or I'm going to Zakopane. What do you recommend?" This, because these are places that I go to personally and I know the people personally and I know, like who can I rent a car from? Where can I go eat? Do you recommend going here? I love, and I'm just going to tell you guys. You guys will be probably the first to know. I'll be doing like a e-guide essentially, but in English for English speakers, because that way it'll be checked out. You know what I mean?
yeah.
People could, it'll be very easy to read. I'm gonna work on this probably starting next year, honestly, because it seems like living here after some time and connecting with people, you know who to go to and who not to go to.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's great, and that stuff is invaluable, especially if you're not a native Polish speaker. And kind of going off of that a little bit, I'm curious too about so being. I mean, you can relate this, I guess, different ways. Being, your wife is from Poland and born and raised there. You're from the U.S. and coming there. What is the relationship of people of kind of our age, the millennial generation, to their history? I mean, you're obviously very passionate about it, very interested in it, and you've delved into it and learned about it. And sometimes it seems to me like a friend of mine in Poland who said that my knowledge of Polish history would put Poles to shame, um, and that there's
Yeah.
this a lot of times you have this uh, Polish history can be seen as this. It's tied to so many different things. It's tied to national identity, but it's also tied to the religious sense, and it is hijacked for different reasons at times. But there's also, as I think we've established, there's this foundation that no matter what can draw you into what is great about Poland, no matter what, the culture, the food, the traditions. So I'm just kind of curious what your sense is of that, and what maybe generally the relationship is between sort of, like I said, our generation of Poles to its history, and if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I don't know how it is in the rest of Poland, but from the people that I work with, for example, yeah, I would say that you and I have a very similar mindset. We could probably put a lot of people to shame when it comes to history, genealogy, et cetera, because that interests us, right? There's there's a larger awareness here, I'd say, compared to, for example, people from the States that I've grew up with. The people here have a larger awareness of where their families are from. They just know it, like, which is cool. Like, I recently it was All Saints Day, All Souls Day. People know where their ancestors are buried up until their like great great grandparents or even further, which is like, okay, I could vibe with that because I know the same. It took me some digging, but I did it. I'm going to continue because I think personally, I kind of think way ahead. But like when I die, you know, I would like people to remember about me or know about me for generations to come. So didn't take much research, but I located my great great grandmother, and if it wasn't for my grandma, my dad's mom, she knows where she's buried. But once she's gone, hopefully not for another hundred, for a long time, but who would have taken care of her grave? You know what I mean? It's this fantastic obelisk. It's there was only two that I counted in the whole cemetery. So it's like very, very cool. So I want to continue that, but I think the awareness of like our age group is still really good. The 30s plus, even some in the like late 20s, I'd say they know where their grandparents are from, where they come from, what the culture's like. But again, I live in a different region of Poland. I think in smaller regions or in some villages in Poland, people have the same mindset. Like they find it important to know where their people are from, their grandparents and great grandparents. However, then you meet the people that are, well, they don't really care, I guess, or oh no, yeah, my parents are from here, but besides that, I don't know anything. It's like, what? You're not curious as to like where your great grandparents are from, or what they did when they were younger. You know what I mean? Like I loved asking my great grandma when she was still alive. She was one of the first people to work at the Sears Tower as a cleaning lady.
Wow.
That was cool. I thought my grandma, so my dad's mom, was the first person in Chicago. No, it was her mom. So my great grandma. But I recorded her talking, and I only have 5 minutes of it. But she was telling these stories, and I was like, "Thank God I'm recording this." You know what I mean? Why didn't I do this sooner? So I would ask her a bunch of questions. I'm pretty sure she didn't want to answer to a couple of them because them and their secrets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna dig there. Uh, there's some things that simply we cannot obtain information wise. But I think going back to your question, there's a larger awareness here, which is really nice because then that's going to continue on and on. It's almost normal for some of these people here. They're like, yeah, my great grandma, she's buried there. Why? I'm like, no, I'm just asking because I think that's good that you know that, right? What did she do? Oh, she, well, gazdovka. Gazdovka simply means they were farm people. They had cows, they had sheep, goats, whatever, because that's essentially all they ever did here back in those times. There wasn't much going on unless you lived in Zakopane or near. Then you'd be able to walk or drive to work at one of the hotels. That there were very few, but they existed, right? So that's why a lot of people from here moved out to Chicago or Toronto or the East Coast. A lot of people in Pennsylvania and Maine. So I know even my wife's side of the family very well and their genealogy because I think it's important to my kids to know also. They my great hold on, so my wife's great great grandfather, he was a coal worker in Maine. They mined out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was all my people were all coal miners in Pennsylvania.
And Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And I'm doing the digging for them because somewhere in Franklin, Maine, and I was like, all right. So then I did some digging. It took me 5 minutes. The
Yeah.
internet is fantastic.
Oh, it
And
is.
it was a quick location as to what town, and I'm like, oh look, you go on Google Maps, there's a store that sells pierogi.
Yeah.
There's a store that sells sausage. I was like, guys, it's only a matter of flying out there, getting our feet on the ground, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Calling them up.
Yeah, yeah. It's my last episode of November was on, or this month in November was on genealogy. Was with Polish genealogists, and
Sweet.
I went back with I have a friend of mine who lives in Krakow who's a genealogist, and he did some research there. And then I went with him to the towns because no one in my family had gone back. We didn't even know. My grandparents didn't even know the towns where their grandparents were
Whoa.
from. They had no
Okay.
idea.
Look at you, man.
Yeah, so I and genealogy was in many respects the way that got me back into or really into Polish
Mhm.
culture and into it, because it was this value of, and the small town in Pennsylvania that my family immigrated to was a mile square, and I could go and find, like you did, the
Yeah.
generations, like that's my second great grandfather, that's my third great grandmother, they were all
Are they
kind of,
all buried there?
they're all buried there, they're all in the same cemetery, but yeah, it's and that's why I'm really glad that genealogy has become a bigger thing, and with the access to the internet, like Ancestry.com, because there was something. It was so otherworldly, and I don't know. I guess going back to kind of my original thought on this, like I don't know if it's in every generation. There's people that value this, that like
Yeah.
you and I, that pass
Yeah.
this on, or if it's just because I think the great temptation is to say like, oh, like even talk about influencing, like, oh, it's a corrupting influence. It's people's attention spans are lessening. But then talking to someone like you who has this content and this history and family and stuff, and then it blows up. There's an interest out there, and I think if you can harness that for good, for something like that, like talking about Podhale or Goralski culture, and then this is my thing with this, which is to bring these stories and to keep them going in a modern medium. We've been doing this at St. Joe's Polish in Camden for over a century, trying to just keep our Polish culture going, infuse it with the faith of our ancestors as well. But then it's also like now podcasting and influencing things. This is the way to do it now.
Absolutely.
So we need to do it, and it just is. I'm just very, like I said, I'm glad that genealogy has kind of taken off, because that was really my gateway in, and then
Right.
it was to find those stories, and then it was walking in these areas like it had been 100 years since someone with my same DNA had walked here.
How did you feel when you walked down there?
It was indescribable. It was
Right?
just, and actually the original town was no longer there. And we're
What?
driving, and even my friend Daniel was telling me, he's like, this is rural even for Poland. And we're driving, and we're trying to, he stops, we're trying to find where the town is, because it seems like it's just gone. And he finds this old farmer, and he's talking to him, and he's like, where's Palula at? And then I said to him, I was like, we need to go that way, like we need to go down this road. And we go down, and there's this monument, and it says this is where the original village of Palula was. And it was just like, and the gentleman who owned the land there, he was actually, one of his ancestors was one of my ancestors' godfather. I recognized the last name, on one of the documents I had. So it was just like there was this pull there. It was like the land is something. It's dragging me in. It's this magnetic force. And again, like I don't know if it's just because I'm hypersensitive to it, because I've been involved with it. And I grew up with my grandparents, and I heard all these stories.
Right.
Um, most of them were tragic. It was like, my second great grandfather, he was killed in a coal mine when my great grandfather was 5. So he didn't
Oh,
have,
no.
or 4, he didn't have any stories from his family really, or at least none that he imparted onto his son, my grandfather. He
Yeah.
knew bits and pieces, but it was like, and there was this tremendous heritage, even on that same side. I had family that fought in the January uprising. No idea about it, and
Wow.
it was just like, and it never would have been discovered if I hadn't gotten into it and hadn't researched it and found this
That's
stuff.
so important. That's so important. I'm so glad that's to be able to have a relative in the January and any uprising in the history of Poland is an honor to have. Seriously.
And it makes me sad to think that there's so many people who are several generations removed, like myself here, who have
Mhm.
been just absorbed into this waspy sense of what America is, so quote
Wow.
unquote supposed to be.
Yeah.
That it's like you're losing this, but it's such a rewarding experience. Um,
Right?
yeah, I
No,
just
you
want to
gotta
tell the
keep it
whole
up.
world. I want to tell the whole world.
And you should, absolutely, because I then it makes the people, I'd hope so at least, them, like, revive their interest in, "Holy cow, where is my family from?" You know, I have kids, and I gotta tell them something too, where they're from. Like, you can't just say, "Oh, yeah, you're a mutt. You're
Yeah,
mixed of this and that." It's like, I heard that so many times, like, I have, like, then okay, so, like, you go to school with these people, I was raised with people from all over the world it's America, so we can't expect anything less. But it's just nuts when they don't know where they're from. Like,
mhm.
the general area, like, I don't know, I think from Poland, man, I don't know, France? I was like, "That you even know what a map is?" It's like, get your stuff together and start digging while your parents and grandparents are alive and start figuring it out because it's a curse, but it's such a blessing because I know my siblings, they know some, they're kind of interested, but I know that hopefully my nieces and nephews, if at least one of them is interested, they're gonna be like, "I'm gonna go to Uncle Christian because he seems to know everything." And I'm like, "Yeah, here you go."
Yeah.
All laid out, black on white, very easy. This is where we're from.
And it just is, and it's, when you become that family historian, because that's exactly what my role is. And one of my
Tell
first
me your
cousins,
story.
yeah, one of my first cousins, him and his wife are pregnant at the moment, and I was thinking about this the other day, like, he has had a similar interest in the family history and being in communication with it, and it's like that's the gen that they I want to pass this on as much as possible as well.
That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that, man. I'm glad to be able to meet like-minded people because it there's so much gunk in the world and on these platforms. It's what it is, it's just human nature, it's just the way it is, but using it for good, it's such a good tool, it is. So being able to just use it and direct it in a way that we could, just use it for good. I mean, there's so many, but there are a bunch of like clearly there's this niche, but it's a growing niche. Like if you're gonna leave Zakopane and the Potala area, you go not even an hour, and you're already talking to different kinds of people that dress differently
Mhm.
culturally, but we're similar, right? We have a similar dialect, but no, we are not Górale we're not Highlanders from the Tatra Mountains. We're called Zagorzanie,
Mhm.
which is past Nowy Targ, 30 minutes, completely different. So Zagorzanie, that's where my grandpa's from because my last name is Novak, which isn't a Highlander name at all. Novak is a general Polish last
Yeah,
name.
new man, yeah, yeah,
Newman,
yeah.
Germany's Newman, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and geez, oh, and Croatia
Mm,
and Poland. It's the number like most popular last name.
yeah.
Totally. But my grandpa, he came from just south of Krakow, from the Zagorzanie area. So different Highlanders, but they're Highlanders. You know what I mean? So it's good to know because Novak, jaki Novak? Novaki to nie
Yeah,
Górala, did
yeah,
you say?
yeah,
Novaks aren't Highlanders. I'd be like, Oh, but we are.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
let me
yeah.
tell you why. And then I usually lose them at that point because they're not interested.
I
So
know. It's funny, the Polish names too, because like one of my good friends is Niemiec. And it's
oh,
like,
of course.
you know, come on, like, your name is literally
Hold on.
German.
Yeah, but my cousin's last name is Nimitz as well.
Yeah.
Diana.
But
Huh.
that makes sense. I mean, but it's that area was under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So it's like, and his family's from Shimish, so it's like they're way out there. But
Way out there.
yeah, but yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Isn't it? Love nothing more than to sit down with like-minded people because, like, I'm lucky enough to have a few here. You know, we could talk about history, everything.
So, Christian Novak, thank you so very much for being on Pierogi de Prayer. This was a terrific conversation about Highland culture and Polish culture and everything in between. So,
Yeah, we
thank you.
we hit up a lot of subjects. So, and that's really cool because when you are able to, that clearly means you met the right person. So, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Hopefully, your takeaways from our discussion are that the value of influencing is truly a timeless exercise in the conveyance of information. At the end of the day, no matter if it's graffiti in ancient Rome, 19th century newspaper, or 20th century radio show or movie, the value of influencing in our modern age comes from the content that it contains, not necessarily in the medium itself. All influencers aren't just making a tasteless video on TikTok or showing some hack 30-second tip that has no real application in the real world, or even producing a nonsense podcast. Wait a minute, who on earth wrote this? Anyway, while perhaps these things can be dismissed as mere vanity projects, the value of influencing can be found if we evaluate the motives of the influencer themselves. In the case of Christian, you will probably now see that he is someone who wishes to share his sense of Polish identity and heritage with the world, as much as we do here. A sense that was passed down through his family for generations. While the temptation may be to think that the world doesn't need another influencer out there corrupting young minds, perhaps it is that perception that we have that needs more of an adjustment. It is easy to become cynical about how our traditions and culture may be fading and undervalued by the next generation. Yet the online following that people like Christian has might prove to be the undoing of that feeling and a cause for hope. Additionally, he and I being so very similar in age and perspective, we both happen to have Labrador Retrievers and a young son each, by the way, also gives an interesting parallel to how the lives of Poles and Polish Americans complement themselves in our current time and place. We Poles are a people who have constantly seemed to have a need to straddle the divide between the homeland and wherever we physically find ourselves. I hope that this most recent iteration gives rise to a continuing perspective of just how connected we all are to each other. A famous saying that has been quoted before on our program bears repeating at this point. Wszyscy Polacy to jedna rodzina. All Poles are one family. If you'd like to view some of Christian's great work, please check him out on Instagram and Facebook, which we will link to on our pages this month and in our show notes, and we'll share any updates on his efforts to promote Zakopane and Highlander culture. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. As with Christian's pages, this greatly helps to share our message. Most importantly, if you listen on Apple or Spotify, please take a moment to give us a review and hopefully a 5-star rating. I can't emphasize enough how this greatly helps us to become more visible. As always, you can reach out to us at our email address, pierogiprayer@gmail.com, or on our social media pages. And of course, please come visit us, as you can every Sunday at 10 a.m., as thousands have for a century. Until next time, saute some pierogi and go sit with a saint. Dziękujemy, thank you, and do usłyszenia.